welcome to Let's Talk AppSecOps. My name is Mark Lambert, Chief Product Officer here at ArmorCode. And what we're going to talk about today is how prepared are you for the first AI cyber attack? Because we all know it's coming. At some point soon, it's going to happen. But let's not panic. Anybody that's used ChatGPT to write something or to help them with some kind of creative work will realize that the responses aren't too amazing. They're pretty good. But they're not perfect. The thing that they're good at is the speed, though. And that's going to be the key element for us when we start to talk about combating cyber attacks that are driven through AI. It's going to be the speed at which we react. Now, our current approach to vulnerability management is a little bit flawed this way. First of all, we're focused on CVEs, so publicly known and documented vulnerabilities. There's a lot of latency in there. Well, first of all, the bad guys are already doing the work to figure out how to make the vulnerability. Then somebody else discovers the vulnerabilities. There's latency there. Then that gets submitted to NVD, and you're up on the system. But there's a level of adoption and review that ends up happening. And plus, our scanning technology also has to create the checkers to find that vulnerability. So there's a lot of latency in that process. Now, even when we've found the vulnerability, we also need to react to it as well. So speed is going to be the key for us. Now, the thing that the AI is going to really double down on is linking these vulnerabilities together. So if I take into the fact that I have a latency on the identification of the vulnerability, we'll come back to that in a moment. But let's take the second piece, and once the vulnerabilities are known, what we want to be able to do is to react to them so that the AI can't chain those things together so efficiently. So this is where we want to look at vulnerabilities that have actually been exploited, or we can see predictors to them being exploited. So here we have, obviously, 𝗙ecie_𝗿𝗃. This gives us a list of known exploits. There's a number of other exploit feeds out there as well. We also have EPSS, which is the exploit predictivity score. This can also help us as well. So if I'm looking to build in a defensive strategy against an AI attack, that's going to happen quickly, and it's going to chain these things together, and it's going to just blast us to try and identify a sequence of vulnerabilities that can help us help them compromise our system. So what are we going to do? We're going to identify those vulnerabilities that have a known exploit or a predicted exploit, and we're going to prioritize those first. Now, this is a little bit still reactive. I guess it's a little more proactive because I'm not actually responding to an exploited individual vulnerability. I'm thinking more about predictive scoring. Threat intelligence can help here as well, by the way. But that exploited or predictive exploit of a vulnerability is key. And I'm looking to focus so that I'm going to actually remediate a number of these things so they can't be chained together. Now, really, though, what we want to be able to do is to start thinking about weaknesses, changing our mindset from just vulnerabilities. Of course, that's the place to start. These are the known things. But weaknesses are indicators of a challenge that or an underlying flaw that could potentially be exploited. If we look at the typical kinds of weaknesses that are most commonly exploited, it's usually things like input validation, sanitization of values before you're passing in the values to SQL injection for a SQL queries, which in turn leads to SQL injection. These are the types of things that we can very quickly identify through static code analysis of both our own code as well as the open source code that we're leveraging as well to give us an understanding of our risk and our posture. Now, you have to think about, okay, is the open source fundamentally, safer or more risky than my proprietary code? Well, there's a number of reports out there that tell you, no, they're about the same. Code is code. However, the disadvantage that we're running at when we're absorbing or when we're bringing in open source is obviously the bad guys also have access to that source code. So also our AI is going to start introspecting the open source projects, trying to identify and exploit those weaknesses, and then proactively go ahead and trying to identify websites or what have you that are exposed and have those potential libraries leveraged, or we can potentially leverage those weaknesses. So really, we need to be taking a view when we look at CWE identification, and when we even look at things like SAST, trying to leverage that ourselves to build a reputation score around an individual library, understanding what the weaknesses are that are potentially exposed within that. So there's a few things we can do. So first of all, let's kind of do standard risk-based vulnerability management practices. Hey, let's fix the vulnerabilities that are known exploits or predicted exploits. That's going to be my first line of defense. My next thing is to start looking at weaknesses, both within my own code base as well as within the open source libraries that I'm leveraging, and then start to look at reputation scores and so on and so forth, how well those libraries are being maintained, and trying to identify how risky those libraries are. At the end of the day, there's going to be so much data, so many vulnerabilities, so many findings we need to prioritize with them. So obviously exploit is one of those things. But the next level of prioritization is going to be understanding where your business impact is as well. So, as an attacker comes in, they may come in through an externally facing application. So that becomes your first line of defense. That becomes your #1 priority asset. But don't forget that you can move laterally through the system. So even though an application which is exposed on the internet, is my crown jewels, it's my first thing to protect, if that is breached, we can potentially move to other systems which are not directly connected or directly exposed externally. So you need to still consider them, but obviously it's a lesser priority. We've got so much to do. We need to figure out the priorities. Anyway, as we look towards the end of the year, this is certainly going to be an area that we're going to come back to. I know this is a hot topic with a number of the CISOs that I've been talking to recently, which is why I put together this podcast. So stay tuned, because for sure, we're going to talk about this again before the end of the year. So click like, subscribe. Thank you for tuning in, and stay tuned for our next episode. Thanks very much.